Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this working? Am I on? Okay, good. I'm working. All right, so thank you all for being here. My talk for you guys today is probably going to be a lot different than the ones you've heard so far, in that my primary focus is getting as practical as we possibly can to safeguard victims when they're actually at the church. Because, a lot of times what I see, and a lot of churches see this across the country, is that when these domestic violence situations start to unfold in people's lives, a lot of times, I'm going to say she, the wife, typically, will return to church, right? There's a lot of things going on. She's looking for some help, some divine intervention in this type of situation. Unfortunately, for a lot of them, they get to church and they find out it's not a very safe place to be, right? We know the bad guy knows where she's going to be every single Sunday. He might even know where specifically in the sanctuary she's going to be. And if there's kids involved, well, now and there's custody battles and all that kind of stuff going on, they know I can go to the church there, and if they don't have a good check-in, check-out procedure, I can take the kids and I can disappear. So what it ultimately comes down to is, for me, is we can't do all this other stuff that we've talked about so far if the victim does not feel safe inside the church. And she's got to know that nobody's going to run off with her kids while she's in their sanctuary. But anyway, so a little about myself, kind of already covered there. Putting a photo on there seemed like a good idea until you see it blown up like that. But that's my daughter, 24 years old, and my wife. We've been married for 32 years. Both of them still seem to like me, so that seems good. But high school sweetheart, been together a long time. She's been with me ever since I was in the Army. I joined the Army right out of high school. And went to war twice, and she stayed with me for that. Came back with all my fingers and toes, but I am a 100% disabled veteran. Spent 18 years in law enforcement, took an early retirement, partly for medical reasons, and I'm the founder of Sheepdog. So Sheepdog Church Security Academy all came about because I'm kind of a slow learner. After I got done with my master's degree and my ministry degree, I was basically asking God, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to serve the church? The assumption was, because of law enforcement and because of the military, I figured, well, maybe it's a chaplain, right? That kind of makes sense. But God in the background was kind of throwing little hints at me. So the first little hint he had for me is the pastor approached me and said, hey, we know that somebody's been stealing money out of our safe. And so we need to fix this problem. Can you help us fix it? So I bought a new safe, created whole new policies and procedures, even right from the collection all the way up to it getting deposited into the bank. That procedure was so good, the insurance company and the annual auditor was like, hey, we got to share this. This is great. So all this goes on, and I go back to my life, right? No hint, no clue from God there. Time goes on. Pastor approaches me again, and he says, hey, the insurance company is requiring that we have training for everybody who works with children. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So I did the same thing. Came up with policy procedure, had instruction, brought in people smarter than me to teach the volunteers. And it's great, get rave reviews, and I go about my life, because clearly, still not getting the hint. Finally, the third time, the pastor approached me and said, hey, we want to start a security team. We prefer safety team now, but we want to start a security team. We want you to head it up. And so that's kind of when I finally got a clue, right? So I answered the call, and I started my first safety team. Just brought a bunch of volunteers together, mostly men, and that wanted to serve, be part of this safety team. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat is what a lot of us are talking about here now, is they were completely unprepared. You know, just like churches are unprepared for violence and abuse and all that kind of stuff, these guys were completely unprepared. And no law enforcement background, no military background, no security background. So what I did is I put together a security academy, for lack of a better term. It was 8 hours of really bad PowerPoint presentation. We just did it. We pushed through. And what that allowed us to do, of course, is now I'm not dealing with people that have no clue. They got at least some background on what to do in case of emergencies. Now it gets a lot more complex than you can cover in an 8-hour day, but it was a step in the right direction. So what brings me here today is not only to get really practical with you of how a safety team can help defend victims at church, but also because of this situation right here. So probably a lot of you have heard about the Sutherland Springs church shooting. It's a relatively small church. Bad guys showed up and entered in and killed 26 people, wounding 20 more. What a lot of people don't know is this is a domestic violence situation. He came to this church because it was his ex's mom's church, and he knew that his ex wasn't going to be there, but he wanted to do as much destruction as possible in her life. That's what it was about. That is evil. Absolutely evil. Statistic that just came out not too long ago, it's been kind of steady, but last time it was updated, is of violent incidents. Well, let me back up a little bit. So from 1999 to current time, there's been roughly about 1,900 deadly force incidents at church. And what I mean by that is people presented with deadly force threat. Okay? And so that doesn't mean they were shot and killed. It just means they were presented with that. So anything that would count on that, assault could count on that list. There was a pastor in Tennessee that got beaten up by a person with a guitar. That's deadly force, even though he survived and his injuries were relatively low. But anyway, and all of those incidents have about 800 deaths. Now, of those 800 deaths, what's interesting about this statistic is one of the reasons the violence happens in the church is because of domestic violence spillover. So it's robbery and other disputes, but about 14% is domestic violence. But of those 14% of those incidents, it makes up for 25% of the deaths. So essentially what that means is this, is when domestic violence spillover occurs at the church, it is the most deadly of the threats. So we really have to be on top of this as churches and people that go to church to be part of the solution. Now for me, the solution really comes down to having some sort of safety team. It was asked earlier, where are the men? And maybe I should give a little caution here first. So I 21 years in the military, been to war twice, been law enforcement 18 years. If I'm a little abrupt, don't take it bad. This is just how I talk. But where are the men? We're having the wrong kind of conversation with men. I've trained over 5,000 people to serve on safety team, and you know what that is? 99% men. So if you want men to be involved in this issue, this is the conversation. Take your instinct as a provider, a protector, and come be on the safety team. Be part of the safety ministry and serve. Having a safety team can make all the difference. I'm going to get into some practical stuff here because that's just the way I'm wired, but one of the things that we have to do for pastors and other people in the church is we have to give them instruction on specifically what to do. And the more step-by-step you can get, the better it's going to be for them. If you talk to my wife, she'll tell you she has to spell things out for me. And I think I'm probably a normal guy, so that's what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of spell things out. Pastor gets a report, hey, we have somebody at our church that's a victim of domestic violence, or they're going through a divorce, or there's a custody issue going on, or all that kind of stuff. We want the pastor to do everything that we've been talking to up to this point, but we also want him now or her to create a safe environment, right? That wife or that victim, the children need to be protected. So the pastor is either going to hear that directly from the victim, or it's going to come through the grapevine, right? And when they get that information, they need to confirm that information. Now, I set up an appointment, and after hearing earlier on, we don't want to create a board sitting there with the poor victim sitting in a room full of men. But we do need to kind of confirm that information the best we possibly can. And once we confirm that information, we're looking for specific things. Like, what's the victim's name? What's their description? Do they have children? Children's description, their ages, where are they during any given service? Are they in the children's section? Does she like to sit front left or front right? Whatever it is. We need the subject's name. We need the subject's description. By subject, I mean the bad guy, if that's not clear. The bad guy's name. We need to know what kind of vehicles he drives. And then that pastor needs to notify the safety team with all of that information. So that way the team can do what they're going to do, and we'll get into that in the next step. The other thing is the pastor, the leadership needs to consider trespass warning the husband from the facility. So a trespass warning kind of works like a protection order, not quite, but kind of. But what a protection order does, or a trespass warning does, is it pre-warns law enforcement that there's a potential problem at the church on any given Sunday and Wednesday. It notifies the bad guy that he's not allowed on property, which then empowers the church to do something, and that is if he shows up on the property, they can immediately call 911 and let the cops drag him off the property. That's the best case scenario, right? Because with the safety team, if it comes down and it's violent, we don't want them to get violent with us. Rather, we want them to get violent with the cops. But a lot of pastors are reluctant to do the trespass warning because it's like, hey, we're trying to reach out to everybody. We want this person to reconcile and blah, 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 blah. My answer to pastors, and I told you I can be rough, is there's 250,000 churches in the United States. He'll find one. It doesn't have to be this one. So send him on his way. All right. So that's the pastor's course of action. I know I got a couple pastors in here, but I just want to comment on pastor confidentiality. You've probably heard about this. This is where conversations are protected between a victim and the pastor, or it can be the abuser and the pastor, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times pastors take this maybe a little bit too far, and they'll say, I can't share any of this kind of information that you just talked about, Kris, with the safety team because pastor confidentiality. Well, these are a couple things I have to say about that to that pastor. Number one, ask. You can always ask, can I share this information with the safety team? That's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is this, is my statement on the top. This is the pastor talking to the safety team. There's a person in our church that's going through a messy divorce and or child custody issue or a custody battle. There's a history of physical violence. The person has children in our programs on Wednesday nights and they attend on Sundays. The abuser does not regularly visit our church. I cannot tell you more because of pastor confidentiality. That's not violating pastor confidentiality. It's not. But if you tell me that as the safety director, I can do something with this, right? Because I know there's a fresh incident. So I can talk to my team and say, hey, we need to do what we'll be getting into here in a minute. We can take steps to protect people. And so we don't know who the subject is, but if a guy comes sliding in sideways in a pickup truck on Sunday and jumps out, we know, hey, well, that's probably him. Been waiting for this. The other question I have for pastors is this too here, and I don't have the answer to this. This is something pastors have to think about, and I can't give legal advice. I'm going to start with that. But my question to a pastor who says I can't tell the safety team anything, I ask them this: when does the safety of your congregation outweigh the privacy of a potential violent intruder? So you're counseling this guy, pastor, and he's maybe didn't make an open threat where you're going to call law enforcement, but you know he's on the edge of violence. How long do you sit on that? Knowing that this guy could show up to church and kill 26 people, wounding 20 more. You know, pastor, are you going to take the responsibility of those dead people? Next one is kind of coming down to the victim. So it's being reported by the victim. When does the safety of the congregation outweigh the wishes of the victim? I know that's probably a little bit more touchy in this room, but we're talking about life and death. And we're talking about the victim's life or death just as much as we're talking about the rest of the congregation. So when do we take action? So that's the pastor's course of action. The next one is the safety team's course of action. The safety team can do so much. I cannot tell you. So I'll give you a story we had at our church. Is this guy beating and molesting his kids, beating the snot out of her on a regular basis. Law was finally catching up with him. He was in counseling with the pastor, which was just a complete smokescreen. As this stuff is finally getting to me, and she finally came and talked to me, we were able to provide so much protection. I mean, there was no way in the world he was going to get past the safety team to harm her or to harm those kids. And these are kind of the things we did here. You know, our course of action, we confirming the information. Luckily, I was very fortunate she was willing to talk to me. I did convince the leadership that we needed to trespass warn him. And we had pictures of him. And so if he would have showed up, we would have instantly called 911. And our door greeters knew that, and my safety team knew that. We did increase patrols throughout the entire church, and we'll get on the right side there in a minute. But one of the things that my team needed to be ready for is planning for the long haul, right? Because these things never go quickly. I mean, it was amazing how long, court getting pushed off and all this kind of stuff. He's in prison now, thank God, but it was a mess, and we had to provide that elevated level of security for a long period of time. We had to keep communication with her. She was kind of our main source of, the last place he was spotted, where he was driving around, who he was hanging out with, and what that friend's car looked like, and all that kind of stuff. But she kept us informed really well. Had regular team meetings, letting people know what the updates were, and then ongoing risk assessment. What we did as far as the increased patrol was we first increased the patrol parking lot. So this is kind of the priority list here. The reason we do the parking lot and the exterior of the building, our top priorities is 3 out of 4 violent incidents at churches start in the parking lot. So if you can monitor the parking lot and watch for the bad guy to show up, or if he's hanging out in his car, a woman was killed, where was that? Too many incidents in my head to track. He basically was sitting out in his car. He knew when she was coming out. She was the first one out the door and the first one to take a bullet. And if they would have had a safety team, number one, but number two, they would have been patrolling the parking lot. A guy sitting there waiting in ambush would have been seen, or at least I like to think he would have been. So we patrol the parking lot, patrolling the exterior of the building, and we're checking the back doors. We're making sure that those are secure and he doesn't have an alternate way into the building. He's got to come back through us. We, of course, locked down the children's area like you would not believe. I had 2 guys in there, And he would have been, that would have been his worst plan ever, breaking into the children's area. We had another guy on the team that it was shadowing the victim. So we weren't in her face, we gave her space, but basically followed her wherever she went. And she knew he was there. She knew that that's his purpose there, was to shadow her and to keep her safe. And then we're patrolling secondary entrances. I imagine I was kind of poking around this church a little bit and seeing some of these back doors and stuff like that aren't the main, you got to be watching all those kind of doors. Low traffic areas, unused rooms, things like that, just in case he snuck in and was waiting in ambush. And then, of course, the lobby. You'll see, though, all of these things rely on one person. And that one person, unfortunately, to put something on you, is you got to communicate the threat. You really do. And I don't know. I know how hard that can be. I know there's shame involved. I know there's embarrassment involved. But you got to let the safety team know. You got to let the pastor know, or else we can't help you. I think there's a lot of people probably suffering in churches where they may have support if they would only ask. And so we need victims to tell the pastor, to tell the safety team, and then we can take action. So, checking on my time here. Oh, I'm doing really good on time. One of the things I want to say, too, is to the victims, and the victims need to understand that, is our need for you to communicate so we act is important. But one of the things you have to keep in mind is you're not a bother. So I finished my law enforcement career in Belle Plaine. So apparently a lot of Belle Plainians out there. And it's about a postage stamp, right? And it's got a lot of older people that live in the community. And one of the interesting things about working there is on Monday morning, a bunch of calls would come in for crimes or incidents that occurred over the weekend. And it was like, why didn't you call, Friday night when the guy was in your backyard? Why didn't you call on Saturday when you discovered your lawnmower was stolen? And it was like, we didn't want to bother you. We didn't want to bother you. I was like, what do you think I'm doing? What do you think you're paying me to do? I'm waiting for calls to come in. I'm waiting for an opportunity to help people. That's my job. I get paid. In fact, a shift with no calls is a long shift. It is a long shift and boring. So I love getting the calls. That's the same thing about sheepdogs, is what I call them. A person that's wired to protect. They want to help. They want to be there for you. You don't have to worry about bothering us. When we had that incident go on and I was like, hey guys, we got this domestic going on. It doesn't look good, and I'm giving them the background and all the information. I was telling them to stop coming. I had so many people signing up to work and cover. They wanted to be in the parking lot. They wanted to be in the lobby. They wanted to shadow her. They wanted to do all these kind of things. And it was just like we're tripping over each other because everyone's coming in every single time the doors are open. And is that normally a problem? No. Normally that's not a problem. It's like, come on, I need a second guy working this Sunday. I can't get them to come in, but I say, hey, now we have a situation, and they're coming in. A sheepdog, as I call it, is wired to protect. And the best gift in the world that you can give a sheepdog is an opportunity to protect. And the best thing a sheepdog could do for a victim is give you a little peace of mind for an hour or two on Sunday. So that's all I had, and I went really quick, but I'm kind of used to discussions instead of, instead of presentations. But what are your questions? So I can go on to sheepdog and let you know about. So what we did after I put all that stuff together, and churches started to contact me about setting up safety ministries. What I ultimately started to do was just going church to church to church, and obviously you can't get a lot done in that time frame. never works out. But ultimately, I created an online church security academy, 16 hours of training, covers everything from arson, verbal de-escalation, fire, storms and disasters, active shooters, basic patrol procedures, that a whole kind of deal. Since I started this, trained over 5,000 people in churches all over the country. And it's kind of answering the question, where are the men at? They're out there. I got 5,000 plus. You know? Yeah, go ahead.
What do you train churches about and how to tell the congregation about what's going on?
So the congregation does not necessarily get all the information, especially based on the sensitivity of the situation. Now, if it was highly, highly dangerous, then, disclosure is a tricky question. Because if you knew there's an active threat, like he got in this truck this morning loading up with rifles, and now it's coming. In fact, there was one that was, I'm bad on time and location, but there was an incident not too long ago. An Asian gentleman, domestic violence situation, planned on a shooting, and the safety team was alerted. They did not alert the congregation, but they were ready, and when the guy pulled up into the parking lot, police were also ready, and they took him down without incident. And so disclosure, that's a good question. Typically not much. So if it's in the case of that we had, obviously staff knew, my team knew, the door greeters knew, the children's ministry knew because she had kids in there. And so basically need to know basis. Everyone had a cover, had his picture, vehicle descriptions, all that kind of stuff. And what's kind of good is, I was looking at this church here, good check-in, check-out procedure, that's very important. But beyond that, you need security, right? So in that case, we could put somebody over there, and everyone got a lot better at making sure we were crossing T's and, dotting I's and doing the policy correctly. Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things you can do. That trespass warrant is a good one to start with. And then the second thing is saying, hey, it's Sunday again, we sure would like an extra patrol. But ultimately so you probably have heard this, the average response time for law enforcement across the country is 6 minutes. So that's why you have to have a safety team, Yeah, so I've seen all kinds of stuff occur with students that go through my training. I've had people that were just individuals that went through and said, my church does not have a safety team, but that doesn't mean I can't be trained and know what to do in case of an emergency, and kind of be that leader, if you will, to start to talk to other people about the different kinds of risks and threats that are, surround the church, and to take steps. And all the way up to where you have a full official team, if you will. So you kind of start out. I like starting with training, and the reason I like that is this: is sometimes we want to write policies and procedures and have everything worked out and everything perfect, and then we're going to roll out this program. Well, that can take a long, long time to do that. But if I train you today what to do in the event of a missing child, next Sunday you'll know exactly what to do in the event of a missing child. So I like to do the training first. What kind of people on the team? The kind of really what you're looking for, maybe at first, you're looking for people that are just wired to be a protector. So you're just talking to people and say, hey, what do you think about what's going on? What do you think about the risks that we face? What do you think about the potential domestic violence spillover? What do you think about the potential risk of God forbid, an active shooter? What do you think about all the other things we just don't think about? What about medical emergency? And what if there's a fire? And what if a tornado bears down on us? What are our plans? What are we going to do? And when people will kind of reveal themselves as you talk to people. And those are kind of the ones you say, hey, maybe we should start something. There's kind of a quick and easy, I'll tell some churches, the quick and easy team, like instantly, like you could probably have this organized by tomorrow, is finding like-minded people at church that have that protective mindset and say, hey, let's meet at church before it starts, have a little prayer time, and then let's patrol the grounds before, during, and after the services. And you have 2 instructions. If there's an emergency, call 911. If there's something suspicious, call 911. And then the other instruction you give them is, if you're not trained to do it, don't do it. But just by having some adults that are paying attention, walking around and patrolling, that increases the level of safety huge. And in most churches, it's not right. There's nothing. So I think about a 13-year-old boy that was assaulted and left for dead in a stairwell during an Easter Sunday. And he was in that back stairwell for over an hour. So the guy came in, right? Nobody's watching. He comes in, unlocked doors. It's Easter, right? Goes into the bathroom, waits for his victim, knocks him out, sexually assaults him, leaves him in the stairwell. Well, if they would have had a patrol, right? One adult paying attention. Hey, what's this guy coming in here for? In the middle of the services. Oh, he went into the bathroom. Okay, no big deal. He's in there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Little boy goes in there. Okay. I'd like to think at some point action would be taken. So that's the quick and easy team. But ultimately, you need training.
So then your training also covers natural disaster?
Yeah, we try to be as comprehensive as possible. While this group, we're thinking about a violent intruder, and a lot of people come to church security thinking about a violent intruder. There's so much more, right? I mean, the chances are, I'll tell people, look over your congregation. If you see a lot of gray hairs and a lot of wide waists, you're probably going to have a medical soon. You might as well be prepared, right? You might want to get an AED and some people trained to take action. Theft and vandalism, come on, that's a thing. We know that's going on. So, anybody else? Yep, go ahead.
I'm just curious, what percent of churches today are actually sort of ready with what you're talking about?
That have safety ministries? Not enough. It's just pastors, pastors just don't understand the need yet. And so it's relatively new. So back when I started in about 2009, if you just did a Google search for church security, there was basically nothing. It was just security companies for like the mega churches that would hire trained security. But things are changing. More and more churches are adopting it. Like I said, I've trained over 5,000 people. I might arguably be the largest school of my sort, but more and more churches are waking up to it and taking action, but not enough. That's something too.
What would you have to have in place for a domestic violence survivors group?
You're talking about the perfect storm, right? Especially depending on what the status of the abusers are, right? So if this is the end of the relationship, I think we all know this, at the end of a domestic violence relationship, when the victim is finally getting away from the bad guy, he's got murder on the mind like never before. And now you're take a bunch of those victims and stick them in one room. You're really going to want to have some good security.
Because at the shelter near where
Right. Well, you could theoretically, if you're trying to go for the skeleton crew here, if the church is locked down, so the guy can't get through the front door, step one, and, so you would want, at least one person to work near the room without being oppressive, right? And near there, and then one person patrolling. I would want outside and or inside the lobby, making sure that there's an attempted break-in. So you theoretically, I'll take this many. But if I got two, I'm going to make it work with two.
And there's visual surveillance, camera surveillance.
Oh, there you go. You put one guy behind the camera. That's a good start. I say guy, it doesn't matter. But yeah, one person behind the camera, watch the cameras. That's great. Don't ask, don't tell. So I don't think, so I support concealed carry. I support the training that goes along with that. What I don't support is a Yahoo with a gun that is probably more dangerous than the guy we're trying to protect him against. And so there does have to be training. There does have to be some, use of force laws basics, kind of get through that. Churches can look at insurance, and the guy should probably look at insurance to make sure they're covered in case of an emergency. So it depends on where you are in the country. The vast majority of the people I deal with do have armed safety team members. So, but some choose not to. And I don't think you ever force a gun onto somebody who doesn't want one. Because they're telling on themselves, I know I can't handle this. Like, okay. But then there's pepper spray. There's other things you can do. I love defensive spray. Absolutely love it. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
So when you come to churches and do a presentation like this, individual churches or like a pastor, in our town we have pastors all like get together for like once a month, once a quarter. Would you be willing to like come and do a presentation like this, or?
We could. Most of my communication I have with is, with safety teams. And so, as you could tell, I'm used to talking to the people that do the actual work.
I think it's like for us, I think it's the need too. Like our pastors,
Yeah.
we would never even probably never really thought about it or maybe think about it, but that's so down the list of priorities.
Yeah, I think I see the things I see with pastors typically is they don't like things they don't know anything about. And so when you say, hey, let's start a safety ministry, they don't like that because they don't know what that means and what that's supposed to look like. They also, because they're extremely busy, they don't like good idea fairies, that come along and say, hey, we should do this. And by we, I mean you, pastor, and I'm out the door. They don't like that either. And so you have that. Then you also have kind of like a little bit of a pushback because depending on where you are in the country, and you say, hey, we'd like to start a safety team, and people say, well, what about guns? And now we're in a gun debate, a gun discussion, when we really could be talking about child protection. We could be talking about, all those other things, right? So I think about lockdown drills. So when you talk to a lockdown drill at a church, people flip out. And they're like, oh, we're going to scare the kids. Well, the first thing is since Columbine, kids have been doing lockdown drills, right? And anyone who's a parent right now of kids in school are aware of lockdown drills. Just out of curiosity, how many people in here have done a lockdown drill at school or someplace? Or are parents of kids that have done lockdown drills? Okay. So are we going to frighten you if the church finally says, hey, we're going to do a lockdown drill? It's like, no, okay, that's normal. Finally, you caught up, is what that is. But it's usually the gray-hairs, right? And then I remind the gray-hairs that, remember duck and cover drills? Okay. Was a duck and cover drill going to save you from a nuclear blast? No. But a lockdown drill will actually save lives. So let's get past that. We don't want to offend or hurt people's feelings, and let's do something. Yeah.
So if one of your trainees has to take action, do they go out and then legally, or are they within, certain limits or certain boundaries?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
If one of your trainees has to actually take some action, then can anybody go after them legally, or do they have certain protections?
Yeah, so somebody can always come after you legally, right? I mean, the truth of the matter is I could go to the courthouse right now and try to sue Hannah. I don't know what for, but, I could try to sue her. And I could fill out the paperwork and pay the fee, and she would get served with papers saying that she's got to show up to court to answer to her apples falling on my yard or whatever it would be. I don't know. So there's always a risk. But there are things we can do to mitigate the risk. So one is a lot of larger insurance companies are now offering riders for armed safety team members. That's one. Number two, anyone who carries a firearm or thinks they're going to use force should get their own insurance or legal protection, right? Because something could happen at Walmart, right? And so you need to be prepared. The other thing is having good policies in place, that like a use of force policy and any weapon policy that might need to be in there. And then, of course, vetting volunteers of who's going to be on the team, and actually have it a process instead of saying, okay, you're on the team now. And then, of course, keeping good training records, good training program and good training records. And all of those things can create levels of insulation from legal. All right. I think I'm done with time anyway. 3 minutes. All right.